He built an empire on gold steaks and viral fame, but fame doesn't last forever. For a brief, dazzling moment, Nusret Gökçe, better known as Salt Bae, stood at the top of the digital world. The man in the crisp white shirt, dark sunglasses, and perfectly groomed mustache didn't just cook steaks, he performed them. His signature move, that effortless sprinkle of salt cascading down his forearm, became an instant cultural phenomenon. The internet couldn't get enough. People mimicked him at home. Athletes celebrated goals with his pose, and entire memes revolved around his suave confidence. In a world obsessed with virality, Salt Bae became the symbol of overnight success. The idea that with the right moment and a little luck, anyone could become a global icon. But that kind of fame is built on a fault line. The very platforms that elevate you can just as quickly tear you down. For a while, it seemed like he could do no wrong. Celebrities lined up to eat in his restaurants. Billionaires threw money at his gold-coated dishes, and fans flew across oceans just to see him slice meat in person. Every clip, every sprinkle, every flash of his signature smirk fed the illusion that he was untouchable. A living meme turned mogul. But fame is a hungry beast, and Salt Bae kept feeding it, one extravagant stunt at a time. What few noticed, though, was how the man behind the meme began to blur with the image itself. He wasn't just playing Salt Bae anymore. He became him. The humility that once drove him faded behind designer sunglasses and a growing obsession with status. Each new restaurant, each viral clip, each celebrity handshake added another layer to the character he created. The butcher from Turkey had become a global persona, and the man beneath it started disappearing. The internet crowned him, but the same crowd that lifted him up was already sharpening its knives. As the fame grew louder, the cracks beneath the gold began to spread. Cracks built from arrogance, controversy, and the illusion that popularity equals power. To understand how the world's most famous butcher turned himself into a spectacle, and how that spectacle came crashing down, we have to start where it all began, in a small Turkish village, where survival came long before success. Long before the gold-plated steaks and celebrity fanfare, Nusret Gökçe was just another kid from a struggling family in the small Turkish village of Paşalı. The streets were dusty, the homes were humble, and opportunity was something you had to carve out with your own hands. His father worked as a miner. Long hours, little pay, and barely enough to keep food on the table. Nusret's childhood wasn't defined by comfort or privilege, but by the constant grind to help his family survive. At just 13 years old, he dropped out of school. Not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. Education couldn't fill empty stomachs. Work could. So he found himself in Istanbul, standing behind a butcher's counter, surrounded by slabs of meat bigger than he was. His job was exhausting. 13 hours a day, 7 days a week, no days off. But instead of breaking him, the grind sharpened him. He studied the rhythm of the knife, the way each cut revealed something new about precision and patience. In a way, that tiny butcher shop became his classroom, and the cleaver his diploma. For nearly a decade, Nusret honed his craft across various butcher shops and steakhouses throughout Turkey. He learned not just how to cut meat, but how to respect it, how to balance flavor, presentation, and experience. Every piece he sliced brought him one step closer to a dream few around him believed possible: opening a restaurant of his own. In 2007, he made his boldest move yet, taking out a $3,400 loan to travel across the world. He didn't have luxury in mind. He was after knowledge. He spent years in Argentina and the US, observing the art of grilling, marination, and hospitality. When he returned to Turkey in 2010, he wasn't the same man who had left. He had a vision, and a fire burning inside him that nothing could extinguish. That same year, he opened his first steakhouse, a modest spot with just 8 tables and a few employees. The food was simple but flawless, and word began to spread. Then came the break that would change his life forever. Turkish billionaire Ferit Şahenk dined there, loved it, and decided to invest. With that partnership, Nusret wasn't just a butcher anymore, he was a businessman with global potential. New locations opened across the Middle East, and soon His name became synonymous with quality dining and Turkish pride. He had climbed from the bottom with nothing but determination and a knife. But as success began to surround him, a new hunger took over. Not for food or learning this time, but for fame. And fate had just the thing waiting for him. A single viral moment that would transform a humble butcher into one of the most recognizable faces on earth. It started with one video, just a few seconds long, filmed in the kitchen of his restaurant. Nusret stood in his usual white shirt and dark sunglasses, carving through a perfectly cooked steak with theatrical precision. Then came the moment that would change everything. The iconic sprinkle. His hand raised high, wrist bent, salt cascading down his forearm, like glitter falling from the heavens. It was smooth, confident, and unintentionally hilarious. On January 7th, 2017, Salt Bae was born. The internet exploded. The clip spread across every platform imaginable: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, faster than he could have ever imagined. People didn't just watch it, they imitated it. Athletes celebrated goals with the move. Comedians parodied it on late-night TV. Even people who had no idea who he was recognized the gesture. In a matter of days, Nusret became a global meme, and memes have power, the kind that turns obscurity into stardom overnight. Almost instantly, he leaned into the role. The sunglasses became permanent, the poses more exaggerated. His name was no longer Nusret, it was Salt Bae, and the butcher who once struggled to make ends meet now had the world's attention. Instead of fighting it, he used it. Within weeks, he announced plans to open luxury steakhouses in New York and London, prime locations that would transform his viral fame into a legitimate global brand. But these weren't just restaurants. They were experiences. The menus featured $100 burgers, $25 desserts, and his infamous $1,800 gold-covered tomahawk steak. Even a can of Red Bull went for $10. People weren't paying for food anymore. They were paying for a performance, for a story they could post online. And Salt Bae gave them exactly what they came for: the show. Cameras were everywhere. He'd slice, sprinkle, pose, and vanish. Every meal felt like a live event, and people loved it. Celebrities began showing up, from Leonardo DiCaprio to soccer legends, rappers, and royalty. His restaurants became hotspots for the elite. In less than a year, he turned a meme into millions. Nusret had achieved what most influencers could only dream of. He had monetized virality. His social media following exploded. His fame crossed continents, and his brand became synonymous with luxury, indulgence, and showmanship. But there was one problem with fame built on performance. Once the curtain falls, people start to see what's behind it. For all the glitz and gold, the foundation of his empire was beginning to crack. Because when the cameras stopped rolling and the filters faded, people realized something shocking. The food wasn't nearly as impressive as the man sprinkling salt on it. The world came for the gold steaks, but they stayed for the spectacle. And slowly they started realizing that the spectacle was all there really was. Behind the shiny walls of his luxury steakhouses and the endless social media clips, the truth was beginning to leak out. The food just wasn't that good. At first, the hype drowned out the criticism. Everyone wanted to say they'd been there, to film the moment, to tag Salt Bae in their story, to show off that they could afford a golden tomahawk steak. But when the influencers left and the cameras stopped flashing, the real customers started talking. His London restaurant, one of his most hyped openings, was soon flooded with one-star reviews. Patrons described the food as bad at crazy prices, all show, no flavor, and the biggest scam ever. On TripAdvisor, it ranked in the bottom third of all restaurants in the city. Not exactly what you'd expect from a supposed luxury dining experience. It didn't stop there. Across the Atlantic, critics in New York absolutely tore his burger joint apart. Reviewers called the patties rubbery, bland, and low on flavor. One journalist even went as far as calling it a public ripoff. For a man who had once claimed to redefine the steakhouse experience, it was a brutal reality check. But Salt Bae didn't seem to care. Instead of fixing the issues, he doubled down on the image. He posted videos of himself surrounded by piles of cash, flexing in designer clothes, and showing off restaurant receipts where customers had spent over $100,000 on a single meal. As if that proved his greatness. To him, the outrage was free marketing. Every negative headline just fed the brand. But the more he bragged, the more people saw through it. The charming, humble butcher from Turkey was gone, replaced by a self-proclaimed icon who seemed more interested in attention than authenticity. He even started calling himself an inspiration to young people, saying things like, "Now everybody wants to be a butcher because of me." The problem? He wasn't inspiring anyone anymore. He was alienating them. The act was wearing thin, and the audience could feel it. As reviews grew worse and employees whispered about problems behind closed doors, Salt Bae kept performing, slicing, posing, sprinkling, pretending everything was perfect. But fame, like salt, loses its flavor when overused. And just when people thought his arrogance couldn't go any further, one night inside his restaurant would set off a chain of disasters that no amount of gold could hide. The first real spark of downfall came, quite literally, in flames. In September 2018, inside one of Salt Bae's restaurants, a showy tableside fire performance went horribly wrong. What was meant to impress diners turned into chaos as the flames shot out of control, injuring 4 people, including Czech influencer Tinush Chesnichkova. She suffered third-degree burns across more than a third of her body and spent months in recovery. Her appearance was changed forever. The video of the incident spread online within hours. But Salt Bae said nothing. No apology, no public acknowledgement. The man who once lived for attention suddenly had nothing to say when things went wrong. That silence became a pattern. While his guests were fighting for their lives, he was busy courting another kind of controversy, one that would ignite outrage across the world. Just weeks after the fire, Salt Bae hosted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife for an extravagant meal at his Istanbul restaurant. Lavish platters of meat, gold-coated steaks, and expensive desserts were served, all while cameras rolled and Salt Bae grinned for the footage. On its own, that might have been another celebrity dinner, except Venezuela was in the middle of one of the worst food crises in modern history. Millions were starving. Parents were skipping meals to feed their children. Reports said more than 60% of the country's population had lost an average of 25 pounds due to food shortages. And yet, there was Maduro, laughing and dining like royalty, while Salt Bae proudly filmed it all and shared it online. The outrage was immediate and furious. Venezuelans protested outside his restaurants in Miami and New York. International media condemned him. Even U.S. Senator Marco Rubio publicly blasted him, calling him a weirdo for celebrating a dictator while Venezuelans starved. Still, Salt Bae didn't back down. He quietly deleted the videos but offered no apology, no explanation, nothing. The same man who built a brand on attention now used silence as his shield, but that silence spoke volumes. To the public, it wasn't just a tone-deaf move. It was proof of arrogance, of someone so blinded by fame that he no longer saw the line between admiration and disgust. The illusion was cracking. The internet had begun to see him differently. What once looked like confidence now looked like vanity. What once felt like charisma now felt like callousness. But even then, few could have predicted how deep the rot went behind those kitchen doors. Because while the world focused on his public scandals, a darker truth was quietly unfolding inside his own empire. One built on fear, exploitation, and control. Behind the golden stakes, flashing cameras, and celebrity selfies, there was another side to Salt Bae's empire, one he didn't want the world to see. In April 2023, Business Insider published a bombshell investigation that peeled back the glossy image, revealing what former employees described as a dictatorship disguised as fine dining. What they uncovered wasn't just bad management, it was an entire culture of exploitation, fear, and control built to protect one man's ego. Dozens of former staff members came forward with chilling stories. They described Nusret as a petty tyrant, obsessed with his own image, ruling through intimidation and paranoia. Every move, every shift, every mistake was monitored. One former manager said, His world was nothing but Instagram and fame. He got this godlike complex. Everything revolved around him. Employees were fired on the spot for the smallest reasons: breaking a glass, using the wrong greeting, even wearing the wrong color shirt. One bartender in London said working there felt like being in the Hunger Games, where survival depended on how well you could flatter the boss. But it didn't stop there. Workers were allegedly forced to stage fake lines outside the restaurants to make them look busier. During the pandemic, some were made to sleep inside the restaurant overnight to guard supplies without overtime pay. Tips were routinely stolen or reallocated. In several lawsuits, employees claimed that management skimmed 3% off every tip or withheld them entirely when celebrities dined. Those who complained were fired immediately. One food runner said she lost $140 from her paycheck for delivering a bag of leftovers to the wrong table. Another lost $800 in tips because a customer walked out without paying, as if she was supposed to chase them down the street. And for many women, the experience went from exploitation to outright harassment. A female bartender said she was told to wear short skirts, high heels, and revealing tops on her first day. When she refused, she was mocked, harassed, and eventually fired. Another employee claimed she was denied a promotion because Salt Bae didn't find her attractive enough. These weren't isolated incidents. They painted a clear picture of a toxic empire built not on luxury, but on fear. Even customers weren't safe from the deception. Former waiters admitted they were told to lie, to pass off cheaper cuts as premium, to pour leftover wine into new glasses, and even to falsely label steaks as halal when they weren't. The mission wasn't quality anymore. It was profit and control. One former employee said bluntly, "It was never about the food. It was about squeezing as much money as possible out of anyone who walked through the door." For years, the shine of gold distracted everyone from seeing the truth. Behind the luxury branding was a man who cared more about fame than flavor, more about status than people. His restaurants weren't temples of fine dining. They were theaters of manipulation, all built around one star who demanded worship. But even the most carefully controlled empire can't protect its creator forever. And Salt Bae's obsession with attention would soon push him into the one place where arrogance can't hide: the global stage. By the end of 2022, Salt Bae's reputation was already hanging by a thread. The food reviews were embarrassing, the lawsuits were piling up, and public sympathy had long since evaporated. But what came next would finish the job. Live, on the biggest stage in the world. It was December 18th, 2022. Argentina had just defeated France in a breathtaking World Cup final. The stadium in Qatar was electric. Players crying, fans screaming, history being made. The team had fought through every obstacle to claim the trophy, and at the center of it all was Lionel Messi, finally holding the one prize that had eluded him his entire career. Cameras flashed, the world watched, and then, out of nowhere, he appeared. Salt Bae. Dressed in his signature suit and sunglasses, he somehow slipped past security and stormed the pitch. What happened next was a masterclass in secondhand embarrassment. He grabbed Messi by the arm, tugging at him like an overeager fan. Messi, clearly uncomfortable, tried to pull away, but Salt Bae kept pushing, desperate for that one perfect selfie. Then, in an even bolder move, he snatched the actual World Cup trophy and posed with it, as if he'd just scored the winning goal himself. He lifted it, kissed it, and even called over players to pose with him. A man who had nothing to do with the game, the team, or the victory. The backlash was instant. The internet erupted in disgust. Comments flooded every platform. What is he even doing there? This is the definition of shameless. He's officially the cringiest man alive. The memes were brutal, but the outrage was even worse. FIFA itself launched an investigation into how he had gained access to the field and announced that Salt Bae was banned from all future World Cup events. For a man who lived off attention, it was the worst possible punishment. A global stage turning its back on him, and yet he didn't seem to understand. A few months later, he showed up at the UEFA Champions League final in Istanbul, trying to sneak into the after-party. This time, security didn't hesitate. He was kicked out on camera, publicly, unceremoniously, while fans laughed. Videos of the incident went viral for all the wrong reasons. His attempt to save face by signing autographs outside only made things worse. People mocked him online, calling him a hanger-on, a nobody, a man chasing relevance that's long gone. The moment was symbolic. For years, Salt Bae had built an identity around inserting himself into other people's moments. Celebrity dinners, viral memes, photo ops. But this time, the world wasn't amused. He had crossed the invisible line between fame and desperation. And by the time the laughter died down, it was already too late. The cameras had moved on, the crowds had vanished, and Salt Bae's golden empire was starting to crumble beneath him. The downfall didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, painful unraveling of everything he'd built. Once upon a time, people lined up just to catch a glimpse of Salt Bae sprinkling salt over a steak. Now, his restaurants struggle to fill tables. The same social media that crowned him now ignores him. The followers that once worshipped his every move have drifted away, leaving behind an echo chamber of forced smiles and fading relevance. In the United States, several of his once bustling steakhouses have quietly shut their doors. In London, profits at his flagship location have reportedly plummeted by more than 50%. Even Dubai, his supposed stronghold, isn't immune to the decline. The golden empire that once symbolized luxury and status has turned into a hollow monument to ego. The headlines that once praised his rise now chronicle his downfall. What was once described as a revolutionary dining experience is now seen as a cautionary tale. And yet, what truly ended Salt Bae wasn't just bad reviews or lawsuits. It was indifference. For years, he chased fame with everything he had, feeding off the constant attention, the flashing lights, the endless applause. But the internet moved on, as it always does. What was once viral became stale. The act that once felt unique became repetitive. Salt Bae kept performing long after the audience had left. Behind the facade, his empire was never built on food or hospitality. It was built on spectacle. His success came from the illusion of exclusivity, the illusion of perfection, the illusion that fame equals respect. But illusions always fade. The more he tried to prove he was still relevant, the more desperate he looked. The charm turned to cringe, the mystery to mockery, the brand to a punchline. If he'd shown humility, if he'd focused on quality, if he'd learned from the critics who once admired him, his story might have ended differently. He could have become a respected figure in the culinary world, a Turkish success story celebrated across generations. Instead, he became the embodiment of a warning that ego can destroy even the most dazzling success. Today, Salt Bae still posts online. The same poses, the same filters, the same empty luxury. But the magic is gone. The salt doesn't sparkle like it used to. His restaurants are no longer destinations. They're reminders of how quickly fame fades when authenticity is lost. Salt Bae once sprinkled salt on everything he touched. But in the end, it wasn't the food that dissolved. It was his empire, his reputation, and the illusion that made him famous in the first place.